I've talked a little lately about being very intentional about living in the present and making sure that I do the things, right? Like if I want to do the thing and I can, then I stop what I'm doing and go do the thing. It's not always possible, right? When you have a lot of responsibilities. But there's a lot of opportunities that I miss just thinking, I don't feel like it, or I don't have the time, or that's silly. I don't need to be doing that right now with my time. So case in point, today I finished volume 2 of the Emma and Lion journals series. And I'm liking them. I am. I've already got book 3 in my Amazon cart, hoping to order that in the next few days. But while I was reading today, I came across this passage. I'll find it and read it to you guys. Emma is reading someone else's journal, and in it, it says, "It rained and rained, and I could not sleep for the sound of it against the window. Perhaps an ancient and forgotten god was pouring glass beads out of tired clouds, and I the only one awake in the world to watch them fall." So then a night or two later, there is a storm, and Emma has this imagery in her head from this person's journal. She says she turned off her lamps and sat in the dark watching the rain, and there they were, the glass beads falling from heaven, striking the earth, running into puddles. I almost went out into the storm to gather what I might into my skirts. And so forever after that, she would have that image in her mind of the rain being glass beads falling from heaven. And I just kind of stopped and thought about that for a minute, and just kind of for just a split second had kind of a funny image in my head. And then I picked the book back up again and went to read, and then I stopped and I was like, I think I'm going to sketch that. Now, I am not an artist by any means. I'm not a sketcher. I'm not even like a funny sort of comical sketcher. I'm not a great drawer, but I want to be. But I was thinking, I have the time and I want to draw this out. And so I did. So I'll show you what I did. This is my book journal that I actually don't do a whole lot in, but should want to do more. But I did today. I did something in it today. So I put that quote in there, and then I drew this. And this is what I had in my head, was this little cloud sort of walking along the path, dropping glass beads, but my glass beads are colored. And the storm going on, and then here's Emma looking out the window at the storm. And all the beads falling. So that's just one of those things that, I don't normally do, but I want to do more of. I want to take the time and be creative, and even a silly kind of creative, because why not, right? Like, why not? My backyard forest right now is just a whole mood with this rain and thunder. We have been having thunderstorms for hours today. And my yard is already just so super green, and like anything could be hiding in there. So I live in town, but we live in a really forested area. And so my house is surrounded by this. There are several other houses on my street. Right next door, you can kind of see the neighbors peeking through. That is how dense it is out here. I have been standing at my window doing dishes, thinking how much I just wanted to come outside and experience the super moody weather. And then I thought, what is the best remedy for that? Go. What's stopping you? So I came outside. We have so many neat plants here, but everything is so dense that sometimes you can't really tell one thing from another. Here is a mimosa, and here pretty soon these little, I don't know if you can see those tiny little ball bud thingies right there, are eventually going to bloom out into really beautiful pink flowers. So I will show you guys that later this summer. There's a honeysuckle hiding in there. And everywhere, it is everywhere. It is all over town. I was noticing earlier when I was coming up the road how the honeysuckle had decorated like the street signs. Here we have it decorating a light pole. I'm not gonna walk down there because there is literally lightning everywhere around me right now, and I think I probably should go back in the house. But I am glad to experience this for a few minutes, but now I better experience it from inside. Right in there, my library window. I have just finished reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This was the group read for my children's classic read along this month. And I've read it, you know, many times before. And I've analyzed it and been annoyed with it or been, you know, thrilled with it or whatever in the past. But this time I just read it just for fun, just with fun in mind, just to appreciate all of the wordplay and all of the funny references to people and events and just social things, political things. It was funny. It was a good story to read, but I did spend quite a bit of time contemplating something that I was kind of thinking about when I got to the portion about the mock turtle. So I wrote some notes. This is a journal that I write. This is like my book journal while I'm reading. This is like my book notes journal. So this isn't something that I'm trying to make really pretty or whatever. Like it's not anything fancy, but it's just what I have beside me while I'm reading, to take notes and to, you know, research things later and that kind of thing. But I did write down. So I kind of went on this, like, I don't know, just thought tangent about the idea of the mock turtle and like what has come out of that. So if you are not familiar with the Alice stories, they are full of just funny like puns and plays on words. When I first read this story and was pretty young, I didn't get a lot of it. I just thought, boy, the English are so weird because there was just so many just odd phrases, right, and things. And then as I've grown, I've realized that all of it is just funny plays on words and just nods to, you know, people and society and politics and all kinds of things. So it gets funnier as I get older and understand, you know, things better. But the thing about the mock turtle, I just kind of thought about that for quite a while today and wrote about it and just sort of went on these little tangents because the funny thing about it, so he names this character the mock turtle, and it's a sort of a turtle, but he has like cow's legs and hooves and then like a calf's face and ears, and then he's in a turtle shell. So it's like if you took a calf and stuffed it into a turtle shell, I don't know. So it's just odd. It's an odd looking creature. So he's a mock turtle. He's a fake turtle, right? He's made up of parts that aren't actually turtle parts. Well, today readers might not quite understand that, but back in the day, mock turtle soup was a very popular, you know, soup to make. And I don't know if that was just a England thing or all over the place. And maybe it still is. And I'm just, you know, just not someone who eats mock turtle soup. But it was made of like calf brains and organs and like beef parts, and then seasoned and whatever. And it was supposed to mimic the texture and even possibly the taste of turtle soup. It became very popular because people had been enjoying this, delicacy of turtle soup, but they had almost killed off this turtle that they would, hunt for the soup. And so they started using cows instead because they were, much more accessible, thus saving the species of turtle, but, substituting it with cows. So, this mock turtle in the story, his insides are substituted with a calf, just like in the soup that they made. The meat was substituted with beef instead of turtle. But then I took it like a step further because I'm thinking, well, we have a shirt, like a sweater, right, called a mock turtleneck. And I was like, surely that didn't come out of Lewis Carroll. But it is kind of a funny play on words, right? Like a mock turtleneck. So we have a turtleneck sweater, which in other countries, I think they call it like a polo sweater, or I've seen called other things, but here in the US, we usually call it a turtleneck sweater. And it's just a sweater with a really long, like the collar, right, will come up. And if you pull it out all the way, like you could pull it up over your head, but if you fold it over, then you have this high-necked sweater. Like, look it up if you don't know, but you probably do. But then we have the mock turtleneck sweater, where it has a collar that doesn't come up quite as high as a turtleneck sweater. And then that collar is sewn in to the shirt as one layer, and it doesn't actually fold over, right? It's just like a little piece. And we call that a mock turtleneck sweater. There's no like history of that name. And so it either came from the soup or it came from the Alice story as a joke on the turtleneck sweater. And it's just funny. And one of those things that you didn't know. So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about since finishing Alice in Wonderland. All right, so let's talk about the stuff that I have finished in the last week. So when I went inside after last week's update, I grabbed the next volume of Emma M. Lyon. That was volume 2 of the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. I am liking this series. I read this Friday night and then finished it somewhere around noon or 1 on Saturday. And I did enjoy it. The third one is in my Amazon cart. I don't know if I'm gonna grab it because, guys, these are so expensive if you've been reading them. And I went to give an artist their due, right? So I'm not really complaining. I'm just saying I don't know if I can keep up with these as fast as I would like to, just because they're like, this next one is like $23. And they're pretty thin. Like, it's just a couple of hours to read this, right? So I'm not saying I'm not gonna buy it. Just saying, I might not yet. So the first volume of Emma M. Lyon, I gave 5 stars. I just loved it. I couldn't have any issues. This one I gave 4 stars just for a couple of things. And I'm not really sure how to feel about this, but like in one place, she uses the word sussed, like she sussed it out, right? Like she was looking for clues. She sussed it out. And that is like a 1960s term. And this is like 100 years before that. So that kind of bugged me. But it seems to be a term that the author likes to use because she also used it in her acknowledgments toward one of her, people that she was trying to give credit to in the acknowledgments section. And I don't know if Emma's use of it is like an inside joke between the author and this person, or if the author just really sort of didn't catch it, that's not anything that's even known to have been used before the 1960s. So, or maybe I'm just totally wrong, but I did look it up in the dictionary and it said the first use was 1966. So I'm just saying, you guys can suss it out. All right. And then the other thing that bugged me was every now and then Emma speaks in the third person. Emma M. Lyon liked this, or Emma M. Lyon did this, but she does it like a few times, but she doesn't do it frequently enough to make you think she's doing it on purpose. And so I don't really know what's going on there either. So I'm not sure about that. But as far as the actual story goes, I'm liking it. I'm intrigued. This one left on quite a few cliffhangers, which is why I really want to go grab that book. And I'm not trying to be cheap, but the thing is I'm leaving for England in like 23 days, 22 days. And so I don't know if I want to spend my spending money on books that I can get when I get home. So yeah, it probably honestly is going to wait till I get home, but I will be intrigued to find out what happens next. Oh, I did want to share with you guys a quote from this book that I really liked. This is my little commonplace book that I'm currently putting quotes in. And here, in somewhere in the story, it is written, "Dreams are not reality until they are." And I just thought that was such a hopeful quote, right? Because sometimes our dreams really do come true, and that's great. All right, and then you have already heard my whole story about what I got out of the Alice book this time around. I was just stuck on the story of the mock turtle and the wordplay there. I did enjoy reading this for the most part. I didn't go ahead and read through a looking glass because I was just sort of over it. I can't say that I was really in the mood to read this when I read it, but it was on my challenge for this month for the Children's Classic Read Along, and I definitely wanted to keep up with that. But I did sort of fly through it uninterestedly. So I'll come back to it sometime, which reminds me of the next quote I wanted to share with you guys from my commonplace journal. So I have been watching Ruby Granger a lot. If you guys aren't familiar with Ruby Granger, she's just a year or two younger than my oldest daughter. She's like in her close to mid 20s. I think she's like 24 or something. And she is a PhD student at Oxford. She's had a channel for like ever since she was a teenager, like 10 years or something. And I've only been watching her for the last month or so, and I don't even know how I think actually what attracted me to her channel was she did a vlog on a weekend trip to Bath. So I wanted to watch that because, you know, Bath is one of my favorite cities. And so I just kind of got into watching her stuff, and then now I'm binge watching her because like just some of her thoughts on life and stuff and academics and you know, what is worth learning about and all that is it's not always right on, right? In fact, a lot of times it's not right on, but I'm twice as old as her, right? I've lived a little bit more and I've got kids her age, right? And so some of the things, there's just a matter of, you know, needing to live a little bit more life, but some of her stuff really is speaking to me, to some of the things, some of her perspectives on things. And so I've really been enjoying her videos, super inspired, and I wrote down this quote. So yesterday I was watching one of her videos where she was just trying to have like an all-day readathon. She just had several short stories or, you know, short novellas that she wanted to read in the day. And so she had like this little plan and she was just reading all day. And then every now and then she'd come on and comment about, you know, what she's reading. And at one point she decided to DNF a book. And you guys know what we say, like we always, every one of us, we say life's too short to read bad books or something along those lines, right? Life's too short to read, you know, whatever. And it really threw me because she was like, yeah, I think I'll just put this one away because life is long and I can read this when I'm older. And maybe when I come back to it when I'm older, I will like it better. And I was just like it just changed my whole perspective because she's not looking at life as short, so she's got to get all the stuff done. She's looking at my life is long. So I'm just going to enjoy each day and not worry about it, not stress about it, not worry about running out of time. And I was like, okay, she's, you know, 20 years younger than me, but she has the same assurance of life expectancy that I have, right? Like anything could happen. Hopefully it doesn't, but anything can happen to her, anything can happen to me at any moment. So to say life is long for a 24-year-old, really honestly, it shouldn't be any different for a 45-year-old to say, life is long. I can come back to that later. And it's just like, I gotta get off the subject because I'm gonna start bawling, but it has changed my perspective on so many things. I'm just gonna stop stressing. I wrote in here, this quote changed me. I've been so fixated on running out of time. I'm going to start thinking that life is long. So, thank you, Ruby Granger. All right, so those are the 2 books that I finished. I have just been kind of slowly reading stuff these last couple of days. I started this book, Her Royal Spinus, which I have read 1 or 2 times before. This is a series set in the 1930s, and this girl is like 34th in line or something to the throne. She's like a cousin of the queen or king or something. I can't remember exactly where her family line falls in. I'm not going to go into it too much because I decided to DNF it this round. There was just too much, like, it just got kind of raunchy. And the thing is, depending on what I'm reading and why I'm reading it, I can handle a little bit of stuff that, you know, would otherwise be offensive, or things that I wouldn't actually like partake in real life, or hang out with people that act that way, right? But if it's just purely entertainment reading, I'm not trying to learn anything, I'm not trying to get a deeper message, I'm tired of putting up with raunchiness and just garbage language. So I have made a commitment to myself to be more selective and more careful, and it just got raunchy, so I'm getting rid of it. But I also DNF'd. I don't even have it anymore because I literally threw it in the garbage can. And that is Jane Austen, The Secret Radical by Helena Kelly, I think it is. Boy. I was so infuriated reading what I read of this supposed biography of Jane Austen. Basically what the woman does is she finds every nasty, weird, completely out there, gross, nasty men's locker room, 21st century innuendo that she could possibly find in Jane Austen's stories, and then tries to convince you that that's really what Jane meant. If Jane Austen really wrote like this woman said she wrote, I mean, that is one filthy-minded woman. There is no way, okay? There is no way that almost anything that the woman wrote in this book could possibly have been true. There's just no way. This woman was so out there. I wrote a Goodreads review. I don't necessarily know if I want you to read it. You may change your opinion and perspective on the kind of person I am when you read it. But I'll just leave it there. I did DNF that. I do not recommend. If you want to hold on to your love and joy and peace in reading the Jane Austen novels, don't even pick this book up, because the very first time that she started going off the rails, basically she was talking about the scene in Sense and Sensibility where Edward like cuts up the sister case, and she tries to make this big case for it being a sexual abuse scene, and that was a sign that he was just like a perverted sexual abuser or whatever. Like, as soon as she started going down that road, I was done. I just was like, I'm not letting her run Jane Austen for me, because every time I read the stories, that's what I'm gonna read, that's what I'm gonna hear and see and think in my mind, is all of this garbage that this woman came up with. And I'm just like, she's a professor at Oxford. It's disgusting. I think she needs to find a job that doesn't require her to work with young and impressionable minds. But anyway, it's gross. I would highly recommend that you avoid Jane Austen, The Secret Radical by Helena Kelly. But in celebration of being smart enough to throw that book in the garbage can where it belongs, I picked up Claire Tomalin's biography of Jane Austen, who Claire Tomlin is one of the people that this woman very arrogantly mocks in a just rude manner in her book. So I was like, you know what? I'm going with Claire. Which is what I should have picked up in the first place. But I wanted to read another Jane biography. I haven't read one in a long time, and I just kind of want to brush up on stuff because I'm heading over here in a few weeks, and I want to like pick up on things, right? And so I'm not very far into this because I've just been reading a little at a time. And like I said, reading little bits of other things. There's one part here that I want to actually read out loud to you because a while back I made a video in which I talked about reading Jane Austen's letters and how there was parts that just made me really not like her as a person. And so I want to read this because this kind of adds some perspective to why Jane Austen may have been not the sweetest person all the time. In this portion of the book, the author is talking about the parents and the fact that they haven't lost any children in an age when, people lost a lot of babies and all of them lived to be healthy and strong. And then she was talking about how the mother would, nurse them or whatever, just be very close to them for just a short time and then send them off to be nursed and brought up by someone in the village for quite a while. I think it could have been up to a couple of years or even 3 years. And then when the child it says something about being like of a mature mind, like able to be communicated with, I guess. Then the child came back into the household and was raised up with the family. We see that as super weird. The author explains a little bit about why maybe we shouldn't. I still see it as super weird. But here's where I wanted to read to you. It says, all the same, you have to wonder what effect Mrs. Austen's treatment had on them, being the children. In Jane's case, the emotional distance between child and mother is obvious throughout her life. And not only between child and mother. The most striking aspect of Jane's adult letters is their defensiveness. They lack tenderness towards herself as much as towards others. You are aware of the inner creature, deeply responsive and alive, but mostly you are faced with the hard shell, and sometimes a claw is put out, and a sharp nip is given to whatever offends. They are the letters of someone who does not open her heart, and in the adult who avoids intimacy, you sense the child who was uncertain where to expect love or to look for security, and armored herself against rejection. That makes me feel a lot more compassion towards her than frustration with her. So that's something for me to keep in mind as I read the parts of Jane Austen's letters that that make me not like her so much, right? There's a reason. And, there's a greater life lesson here, but I won't preach at you. But really, we should take the time to see, maybe why people are the way that they are before we get all judgy and offended, right? Okay, let's see. I've also read just a little bit from my Emily Bronte's poem book. In one of her poems called Death, there was one line that I really loved. She's talking about during her mourning, like grieving mourning. Hope was there and laughed me out of sadness, whispering, winter will not linger long. Hope was there and laughed me out of sadness. I love that. I just recently read a commentary talking about how Emily's poems were so dark and all about death, and a lot of them are, yeah, but some of them aren't. Some of them are about beautiful hope. So I love that. And then, what else? I have been reading in the book of Job. So for my Bible reading, I've been reading, this is my Bible, by the way, my floppy. I love this Bible, super floppy. And I've had this Bible for probably the last 6 years. Do you guys do that? Just eras in your life, you get a new Bible to sort of, I don't know, keep the notes of that portion of your life. I do that. I don't know why. I'm kind of due for another one, but this one has so many good notes in it. This is the one that I used during the years that I was doing public ministry. And so it's got so many good notes in it. But anyway, so I have been reading in the book of Job, and I'm just started reading the Bible over again, chronologically. And so this morning I was reading Job 29 through 31. So 29 and 30 talk about how Job was just like highly regarded, right? He was highly regarded in his circle of friends. But people's opinions are fickle and they change at a whim. In chapter 30, verse 2, what profit is the strength of their hands to me? Verse 15, they pursue my honor as the wind. But then in chapter 31, but whose opinion matters? Only God's. In verse 4, he says, does he not see my ways and count all my steps? So having that hope, even when from the outside or to the, less mature believer or unbeliever, it looks so hopeless and it looks like God has abandoned you and he has, he's favoring others over you and all the things, all the lonely things, but God has not, right? We know that with Job and with all of us, he is there. He has not abandoned us. Okay, and then I know that I talked to you guys about my journal for the 50 by 50 challenge, but I don't think I've actually told you what I've written in here yet. So I've only got 32 books and I want to finish filling this in. Like by the weekend, I want this filled in. So if you guys have any suggestions for me, there are mostly classics in here. I'm not going to show you or talk to you about it until I get all 50 and then I'll do a video on it. But I don't even know what the newest book in here is. Probably Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. Okay, that's almost 100 years ago anyway. So they're classics basically. So I've got 32. I need 18 more suggestions, preferably classics. If they're modern, then nothing raunchy or scary or gory or offensive to God. Or about children having horrible things happen to them. You guys know what I like to read. So I need 18 suggestions. So go. Guys, I hope you're having a great day. I will see you soon. Bye.